Welcome to the big house, kid.
Thanks.
So, is this your first time?
What?
Prison. Is this your first time being in the can?
Yeah, you could say that.
Well, you'll get used to it after a while.
So, what are you in here for?
You want to be careful asking that question here.
Oh, sorry.
But since you're new, I'll cut you some slack. So, I guess you could say it all started when I knocked off a string of liquor stores. And then when the cops finally caught up with me, I led them on a multi-state car chase. I was doing pretty good until they shot out my tires and I lost control. Ended up, I plowed into a bus full of circus freaks, heading off to some carnivore someplace. And I tried to blend in, but I guess I'm just not weird enough. They nabbed me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, what about you? If you don't mind me asking, how'd you end up in a place like this?
I killed my game master.
Sorry, what? What's that?
Yeah, you see, I had this really cool character with a ship, money, guns, and everything. And he took it all away and put us on a prison planet.
Oh, a what?
Yeah, I kept trying different stuff like overpowering the guard, climbing the fence, tunneling under the wall. And he kept saying, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And then finally I just snapped and stabbed him with my mechanical pencil. And then I took his stupid Dungeon Master screen and smothered him with it. That's what you get when you mess with Captain Spiff.
Oh, okay. Hey, just hold that thought for just 1 minute. Guard! Hey, do you think you can get me a new cellmate? This guy's freaking crazy.
And I am recording. Jimmy, you follow John.
I love it.
Got it.
Hello and welcome to Roleplay Geeks. I'm your host, Frank.
I'm your token hippie, John.
I'm Steve. I'm Jim. I'm sorry.
You're...
I was reading my notes and I said Steve up here on my notes.
All right.
So we have Steven, Steve-O, and Steve now.
Jim.
So stupid.
And I'm Steve-O, aka the other Jim. Steve.
Damn, we lost to Jimmy and we got an extra Steve. Like we need another one. All right.
I did it really well last week.
Get it together, guys. We're professionals. Suck in the guts.
All right.
Welcome to Roleplay Geeks. I'm Frank.
I'm your token hippie, John.
Jim.
Jesus Christ.
I'm Jim.
I'm non-giggly Steve.
And this is Steve-O, aka the other Steve.
Okay, so after that tortured introduction, today we're going to talk about something that is a kind of a trope that is used a lot in storytelling. That is obviously, since we're in collaborative storytelling, something we use in gaming, which is what happens when you decide that you don't want your people to start with any beginning items. I mean, start in jail. So what happens whenever you're as a character, as a party, start in a jail, or as a GM, what happens when you start your party in jail or prison or some sort of restrictive situation? It's pretty much the start of, like, I think every fantasy computer role-playing game maybe ever. And it's an interesting way because it presents a lot of challenges for players right out of the gate. So let's talk a little bit about that. So one of the biggest problems is the Rails issue, right? Pretty much every prison ever, I think, for the most part, has a kind of, in the real world, has sort of a set way things are done. You know, you get up a certain time, you eat at a certain time, you do these activities, you work all night and all day, breaking rocks, whatever it may be. So I think it's a little bit of a challenge to not fall into a Rails trap for players. What do you guys think? Jimmy?
Yeah, that's one of the many problems I think you have with a prison. That might be the biggest problem, right? Because you want You want to have fun, and it depends on your players too. So if you
Yeah,
have murder hobo players like you guys who don't like being restrained in any way, then it can be difficult.
Why is there a trigger guard on my gun? I don't like being restrained. Sorry.
Yep.
But so let's get to. We're going to I think cover all the big problems, but I think this is such a big problem it's worth starting with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is
I
that
agree.
I really don't know that there's any way to fix this problem from my perspective. I mean, without a doubt, your options as a player are enjoy prison life or get out, right? I mean, you only have two choices.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Well, I was just going to say that's right. Really, from like a gaming perspective, you from the get-go, you have just a couple of outcomes, right? You try to escape and you succeed. You try to escape and you fail. And then what do you do then? And really, that's it. You just, those two options. I don't know that you have any other options. Or like you said, you don't try to escape.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think from a game master's perspective, I mean, I think you're correct, Jimmy, that most often I think that the adventure, the players would be expecting to escape some type of exciting prison break with lots of action and stuff. So if you're talking about strictly starting a new adventure in prison, it can be convenient in a lot of ways. One is all the players are already there together. They can be cellmates or blockmates, whatever. Also,
in a game,
the prisoners don't have any items, so you don't have to go through the central supply catalog if you're playing Traveler or whatever. Go ahead and take a drink, and you don't have to buy items and outfit the items and the armor and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you can really just roll up your character and say, okay, all 5 of you guys are in prison. You've been in prison here for various reasons, maybe a little backstory, and then from there start the adventure. Again, it could be quite exciting. You could make the prison break start right away, which was probably a good idea based on some of my previous experience of trying to do a prison adventure.
I will say one other thing, like real quickly interject in it, and that's not the only thing. One is also just wait for something to happen. And the reason I say that was when we were playing an adventure that Steve-O had done. The game system, I won't say what the game system was, but it rhymes with Graveler. And anyway,
and you may want to smink.
Right. So what happened with it was we got captured, and there was 2 of us. I think it was Jimmy and I on it. I think the only ones in this one.
Mm-mm.
We were on this prison planet. Wasn't you?
Nope, I wasn't there for that one. I was living in D.C. at the time.
Oh.
Frank, you were in on this one, wasn't
Maybe it was
you?
Frank. Okay. I couldn't remember who it was. I just remember somebody there. Because it was... Yeah.
I think Chad was playing and Billy.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, we end up... we're trapped on this prison planet. And we're trying to come up with ways to get out. And we didn't really seem to have, to us, any obvious ways to, well, here's a way to make a break, or here's a way. When we did have some, it was always, shit, snake eyes, what is going, horrible rolls, like time after time after time, and it was like, so basically we got to the thing, it was like, well, are we supposed to wait for something to happen? Because we kind of thought, well, maybe there's going to be some other thing, and that will give us our opening to escape, or whatever, this place will be any number of things we kind of came up with, that maybe something else is going to happen. And we sat there, and it was horrid. It was horrid.
Yeah, and I wanted to clarify just a little bit. So in this group, the characters had their own ship. They had their own, usually the adventures would be we're going to take some job and get into some unexpected, exciting adventure in what looks to be a seemingly simple job. And it was one of the most elaborate adventures I ever wrote. And I mapped out this, horrible planet that was, super hot. I forget the name I named the planet. Probably something super creative like Inferno or something. But anyway, it was super uncomfortable and they had to do hard labor and all this stuff. But the way I set it up was, I'm like, hey, you guys have this shipment to take to this other planet. And when they went there, they were, I just put it all on rails. I made them get captured. They had no option. And then they're on the prison planet. They go through the prison system. And my plan was, okay, they're going to do some things on here. I'm going to make it horrible for a couple of nights, and they're not going to have any way to change their situation for a while. And then I'll slowly start bringing in. They're going to meet some NPCs. We'll slowly start bringing it in. And in the end, they were going to liberate the entire planet. They were going to discover things in the north. All of this stuff. I literally had the entire planet, practically mapped out, the environment. I mean, I had so much detail in this thing.
You're spoiling it because we're still there.
Yeah, right. And, but what happened was because these guys were used to adventures moving quickly, usually using some type of violence or whatever. I can remember Billy specifically just being so frustrated because as soon as you guys got there, he's like, I'm going to try and overpower the guard. And I'm like, no, man, you can't do that. I just want to say, hold on, wait a minute. And then every time it would be like the next turn, I'm like, okay, you guys are getting ready for lunch. Okay. And I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to try and run for the wall. I'm going to try and do all this. It's like you guys were trying to escape, like, or do something or overpower a guard or all the time, and I could tell every little thing you tried to do or asked me, I would just say, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And finally, I abandoned it. I could tell you guys were having zero fun. It was zero fun for me as a result. So, technically those characters are still in prison there. That's been like 25 years ago.
So I think that results in one of the other big challenges for both players and GM, which is there's going to be an element of rails. Even if you wait, there's going to be an element of rails that there's really only a couple ways to go here. Escape, not escape. Though, interestingly enough, none of us have ever allayed ourselves of the power of the legal system and gotten parole. But that's neither here nor there. That's just not something you do in gaming. But I think one of the real difficulties in this type of scenario is how to communicate those little drams of knowledge to the players that they have an avenue that they can start to exploit versus this is not an avenue to exploit. And that I think can be incredibly difficult, both from a player perspective and a game master perspective.
Well, and one last thing on that particular adventure, I think the major mistake was, again, taking established characters that had been free and adventuring for years, that had a ship and all, they had a certain expectation of this particular game, and this was not one of them. I think if I were to do one of those again, I would start with brand new characters and everyone's already in prison. And then you have a completely different situation. Because you can say you've been here for a year, you've been here for 6 months or whatever, and then then you could do the slow burn of what you can establish up front. You've tried a few avenues of escape, but this place is locked solid. You're never going to break out. Too many electronics, too many guards, too many this and that, and then start introducing the possible way to get out. I think would be a better way to go about it than to suddenly take away everything these characters have adventured and received through the years and take it all away and say, okay, you're stuck here for a while. That was, that did not work, at least not with those guys.
Yeah, you got to know your players, right? That's part of it. But I think you can, like Frank said, I mean, the hard part is really giving them avenues to explore while in prison. That leads to the prison break, like introducing the NPCs. And maybe you waited too long to do that. But
I didn't have time. As soon as we got there, they're trying to overpower guards. They're
like
trying
them.
to do. I mean, they just immediately. I think they thought the expectation was, I'm going to get here and I'm going to break out tonight.
Right.
You know,
that was exactly it.
Which again, based on this group, I totally understand that motivation. You know, but again, I put too much detail. I put too much preparation into this thing. And I guess, you know, I'm like, well, hold on. I want to show you all these things that I created. I've spent the last month, you know, drawing out and putting all this stuff together. You know, we need to go with the story the way I structured it, and that was the big mistake. Too much detail on my part, and an expectation of them to go through each little facet of this adventure, which I think is a mistake now for anything, any game, regardless whether the scenario is prison or not.
I would still like to finish it, by the way. I still want to get out.
Well, you guys should be getting out by now, you know.
Yeah, actually, in real time.
25 years is pretty good for, you know, theft of diamonds or whatever.
What was I? I think I might have been 38. So that put me at 63. Awesome, yeah.
You got a hell of a lot of rolls on the aging table.
Oh, son of a... No fair.
We've been 20 years on this hellscape planet. That still sounds preferable to the 6 months I was in D.C., so...
What? I was actually close to looking it up. I know I've got it in some notebooks somewhere back there in my boxes. And for this episode, I was close to actually pulling my notes out, and I had some things come up last night. I just couldn't get around to it. But
spoilers.
Yeah, I just wanted to look at my notes and say, you know, see what all I did have planned. But yeah, maybe. Who knows? Why not?
So let's talk a little bit about more challenges for a GM on that sort of thing. Can you think of other challenges? Those are the two big ones for me, is the Rails issue and then how to communicate how to move forward in a constructive way. But what else comes to mind when we're thinking about challenges from a GM master's point of view?
Spellcasters. For sure, in a fantasy setting. Spellcasters are a nightmare, right? Or it can be.
I would fix that. I would have dispel magic stones all around the prison. I would just have these stones, because it's magic. You can do whatever you want. I would say these special green stones dispel all your, you know, magic, and you know, maybe that could be part of it, trying to get one of them out or something.
I read one guy's solution was to cut out the wizard's tongue, cut off his hands, and while he's in prison, and then when he gets out of prison, you cast restoration on him, so he gets him back. But while he's in prison, it's like, man, I don't want to be a wizard. I'm not a wizard. I'm a thief.
That's a little extreme.
That's what I thought. I was like, man, that's dark, but I like it.
Hey, it works,
right? So I guess there's quick, easy ways to do that. But you know, if you don't do anything like that, then you know, I guess you have problems with spellcasters. But you know what? I don't want to do that though. I want to give the spellcasters, like the wizard, maybe let him keep his cantrips.
Take away his spell book?
Yeah. But then you got cleric problems, right? Because clerics don't...
Or sorcerers or any of those.
Take away their religious symbol.
Yeah, their focus.
They have to have their religious symbol.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the spells, most spells have components.
Mm-hmm. Take those away. So maybe that alone is enough, and they still retain some ability.
I had to trade 30 cigarettes and a night with Bubba to get this pearl to use for.
Oh, you know what though? That could be part of it.
Just to get this piece of leather string.
Yeah, that could be part of it, right? So you have to go get the spell components, and like one of the NPCs has like a scroll that he smuggled in, and it's been hidden away in a hole in a wall.
Don't want to know where it's been hidden away. Yeah. They call that hooping.
I can't read this. It's stained with brown stuff.
Oh, I wasn't going to go there, but okay.
All right, so spellcasters can be a challenge because they can come up with interesting, creative ways to come around what we normally think of as prisons. But I think that Steve-O has a point which is if you're envisioning a world that has a prison, you have to envision that they've come across spells at some point, and either magic use has to be so rare that, like if somebody could do magic in the real world, you would say, well, I have no way of accounting for that, which would make it a costly thing, right? Or it's so commonplace that they probably come up with a way to fix this issue, whether it be stones to dispel magic or a certain type of bracelets that you wear, or whatever it may be. And you find this issue in the game that causes you to drink also, because there's the issue of psionics, right? So the difference is that we've never ever really used that in our particular games, but most games have some sort of extra human capability that makes this a bit challenging, I think.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Oh, just develop psionics. I'll just work at it for, every day the whole time I'm in this hellhole.
So, Stephen, I know you've played in a lot of games that the rest of us haven't experienced with a lot of different groups in the past. What do you have any prison experiences, that sort of thing you can share?
Particularly game-based prison experiences.
Yeah, not real life. We know you.
Oh,
have
you don't
some
want
of
to talk
those.
about my Oz cosplay? Okay. All right. So one of the best DMs that I've ever played with, his name is Kurt McCoy. He has a habit of putting people kind of naked and afraid all together. And it's, you wake up in a dark room and you're like, okay. And he's like, what do you do? And so ranging from prison to hotel rooms to dark alleys, anything like that, waking up kind of ill-equipped and in the dark works for him. And the thing is, he uses it every time that I've played with him, so it's kind of, his shtick. The frustrating thing is when I've done it with other people, and it seems like it's an impossible situation where nothing seems to work, and basically all the DM is doing is trying to make things hard for you because he's cruel, not because it's really germane to the game.
Well, it could be
Or
that
creative.
DM's trying to make you take just that one path that he envisioned that you have to take, which was my mistake on the prison planet that I ran. Having to turn down every single choice they were making because in my mind they had to make the choice, where that was my mistake. What I should have done was been more open-ended and created the prison planet and not had any preconceived ideas of how they would get out of the situation, and probably winged quite a bit of it. So, but I didn't.
Well, as from a player's perspective, that would be appreciated. I think that some people, and John said that's 25 years ago and it's still bugging him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've come a long way in 25 years of GMing. So, that's the kind of mistake that, a less experienced DM would make. Is, you have this thing written in stone and you're like, they have to do this. This is the crux, they're going to do it and it'll be worthwhile. And, they've got to do it. I'm not going to spoon feed it to them. But in some cases, as we found out in a few other games, sometimes people need a little sugar to make it go down. And it doesn't necessarily ruin any part of the game or the trajectory of the game to change something, because the goal still is ultimately for the DM and the players to actually play and have fun.
Right, exactly.
I want to interject something real quick that one of the last games that I did was the post-apocalyptic one with you guys. And there was one particular part where I think it was where the reactor was going bad. Do you remember that one?
That was so frustrating for me.
Exactly, that was for you. And I kept trying to throw you a bone. I kept trying to say something about these walls are kind of like panels.
What was the situation? Because I wasn't on that one.
Yeah, it was. So the premise of it, I took it from this book series that I read, but it's post-apocalyptic. But basically, there was these military bases that had transmat units, and you could basically
James Axler stuff.
Yeah,
Death World or whatever. I read one of those. Yeah,
and so,
Deathlands,
and so you kind of keep, you go into this little room and you transmat to this new location. Then they're all military bases. So anyway, I was having fun with basically throwing these guys into a new situation every time they come out. And so they'd gone from one dangerous situation and they escape and go through the transmat unit, and it's random where you end up. And so Steven's character had been trying to figure out how to go back to where they were or find other ways around. And he was the only character that kind of had any idea of what electricity or technology or anything else did. He was the only one that had any clue beyond a gun or something like that. So it was this whole thing where they came into this new one, and it was the fusion reactor was going critical. And I kept saying, well, there's not a door, but it seems like there's these panels and stuff. And I kept trying to lead him to kind of open, and he kept doing the weirdest things. And I'm like, how is he not getting that it's just panels that come off?
I, for one, am utterly shocked that Steve would do the weirdest thing. This is Frank's stunned voice.
I can hear that in your voice.
There's a broken circuit board on the table. There's tools for fixing a broken circuit board on the table. Steven, I go to the refrigerator. I pull out a jar of jelly, and then I go to the cupboard and pull out some peanut butter. And then
because you know what'll fix this situation? Fondue.
But it was really odd, that it was. And the thing is that Jimmy nor Frank kind of even said anything. They just let Steve do it all. And Steve was just kind of floundering there.
Okay, in our defense, sometimes it is fun just to see where it's going to go.
No, that's true. That is true. And I try
because at the end you get fondue.
Right.
Right.
And so I kind of tried to set things up so it was this, I wanted them to kind of do something because I was going to try and put something for them to do outside of this military base. And it got to the point that it was so close, it was like, we'll just jump in the transmat and go somewhere else. And I'm like, well, crap. and the thing was, admittedly, it was probably, I probably did not either describe something well enough or exactly. I mean, I did put like a countdown, but in a way, that whole little, microcosm of that adventure was like being on a prison planet kind of thing. They were kind of stuck. They were trying to get out. And it was this case of, just stumbling around. And it was not just them, it was also me. And that's one of the things is getting it set up so that they can, give them the tools to do something with. And I think that kind of makes it tough sometimes.
Yeah, and I've probably game mastered more than all you guys. And as a game master, I have that happen often, and I always feel exactly the same way. You just said I probably didn't describe something right, but I can't tell you the number of times that I feel like something's obvious, a clue or something, and you guys are like looking at each other like, I don't know, man, let's try doing this thing. And it's like, but it's almost like you have to get the clue. And that's why I always have an NPC now, and say, well, maybe he means this. Something to kind of, when it has to be guided. I try not to do that now. I try to have kind of create a world and you guys are in it, and then I wing quite a bit of my stuff now because I find it a lot of fun. And earlier on, I've always been pretty decent at winging, so.
Well, like what I wanted to do is I didn't want to just give it away. I wanted there to be the satisfaction of they figured it out, and I actually kind of did this one particular thing to have Steven's character kind of revolve around him with the technology stuff, because his character, it was post-apocalyptic, and his character was one that, he was kind of the oddball in his village because he actually had gotten into reading, which was, hardly anybody could read. And so he read, and he read comic books, and so he actually had some understanding of technology and everything else. And so I was like, well, I want to go ahead and because most of the time it was just running and gunning. It was jump in a car and attack raiders and blah, 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 and run away from crazy mutant hounds and that sort of thing. And I was like, I want to give this Steven a really fun one that he can kind of do his thing and really kind of showcase his character. And it was just like stumble, 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 stumble. Well, crap. All right, you guys have to transmit to another place. At the last second, you make it out before it blows up.
In other words, Steve, you blew it.
You also have to understand, I was doing such a good job at being a bullet sponge, and there were terrifying mental monsters everywhere, that really the biggest thing on my mind at that moment was being able to keep pudding that we found. So,
Jesus, yeah, the pudding. Good God.
Well, I mean, okay, so that brings up a couple points that I want to make. One of the challenges of what Steve was talking about, I think, is the stray comet becomes a focus of attraction for the players, right? So, Steve could say, well, there's this green awning, and not just something he said. And then suddenly, oftentimes, we'll go, well, he purposely mentioned the green awning. And I think the Traveler campaign that we're running, the first section of it that Jimmy ran into some of that issue, if I remember correctly, that Jimmy said something, and then we got really fixated on that thing, despite the fact that that was really relevant to any of it. And I think it can be really challenging to move people off that. And to relate that to a prison setting, you're giving a lot of atmosphere, but how do you know when the atmosphere is atmosphere versus object of the plot? Mm-hmm. As a player, that can be a real challenge. And so to go back to Steve-O's example of where it didn't work for him, okay, there's guards. Well, I mean, every prison's going to have guards, right? So it's just a bit of, atmosphere. But in retrospect, we know that because he's telling us that. But at the time, it very much seemed like, oh, there's guards. Let's overpower the guards. That's a thing we can do. That is an avenue that we can now explore. And I think it's really challenging from a game master's perspective to communicate the important plot points versus just the background information.
Right. And I mean, just again, that was a mistake. The biggest mistake was taking this particular group there, because they expected quick action and quick resolution. I would be very, very hesitant to trying to restrict players long term now that were already established. Not to say I wouldn't create a situation where they're trapped somehow and have to find their way out, but something that is designed to be long term in this prison life, that sort of thing. I just wouldn't do that with a group of characters, or players rather, that are expecting a quick moving open adventure. But I think it would be an excellent starting point for a lot of adventures, fantasy or science fiction. I
will have to say, I think what ended up happening was, because of we were stuck in prison in this Graveler game. Because we were stuck in this, we actually broke out in real life. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think it was a case like that. Billy or something, I gotta get up early. I gotta go. I can't stay. So I think we ended up ending early just because I think he got so frustrated.
You had
Oh,
to
yeah, Billy in
escape
particular
Steven's
was-
game. That was your prison
Yeah.
break.
Right.
So
Well, again, that, like I said, that's one of my worst failures, and I'd been gaming for a long time, and running games for a long time. It was, just overreach. Learned a valuable lesson there. I mean, I've run many successful games before that and after.
Yeah, I was gonna say something. Oh, yeah. So I think one of the challenges, Frank keeps coming back to this, and he's right to do it, because I think it's the challenge for the game master and the players to move the story along at a good clip and clearly communicate, what their situation is and what their options are. So in the case of I want to explain to them you can't overpower the guards, but also while doing that, leave open opportunities for them to gather information and understand, okay, that's not one of the possible avenues of escape. I need to come up and start utilizing different skills in order to make it out of this prison. So it might be a case where I try to overpower the guards. Well, in just a couple of minutes, you've got 6 guards on top of you, and they beat the crap out of you and throw you in solitary. But you notice that there are cameras in the hallway pointing to where you tried to attack him. Perhaps there are blind spots. And as a game master, you give them that information, and then they'll start thinking about it. And for some guys, I mean, some players are... It's not just that they're dumb, but they are. Some of them need that extra information, that additional information that you think's obvious, that in 60% of the cases, or 80%, depending on who your players are, is obvious, but they just need help because they're used to just going through and murdering everything in front of them. But you know what? You know what the best prison game I ever played was? And, okay, spoilers here for you folks out there who haven't played it yet, but it was a module that Frank ran. It's called Into the Abyss, I think. And that's almost like a prison game in a prison game. And Frank did it really well. I don't know whether he ad-libbed some of it or whether he was following the module, because I never read it, but it starts out in prison, and it was really well done. I never felt like I was super trapped. It felt like it fed into the story, and then once you're out of the prison, you're in a bigger prison because you're in the Underdark, and you got to sort of figure your way out of it. But that was a well-done prison scenario, that campaign. That was a lot of fun.
Can I ask a quick question? The characters that you ran in that, were they new characters or ones you'd already been running?
They were new characters.
Once again, I think a prison setting would be fantastic. Starting a new game, a new campaign. Again, you conveniently have all the characters together and they have to start solving problems right away. And you can establish up front, you guys have been in this prison for 2 years. You can't overpower the guards. When that happens, you end up in solitary for 2 weeks. They beat the crap out of you, whatever. Cameras are everywhere. Or if it's a fantasy setting, these dispel magic blocks are everywhere. You've tried casting spells. You don't have your components. And then, from there, create an opening. Create an avenue, an NPC, something you notice, whatever, and then start working it from there. Again, just taking these established characters and putting them in that situation.
Well, I think that it can be done. If I may politely disagree, I've never done it, so I'm just spitting theory here. But I think that one of the challenges, and this may be a bigger topic for another podcast, is genre change. And I don't mean space versus fantasy. I don't mean that. I mean, most of the time when we're playing Graveler, we are all thinking in terms of Star Wars at some level. I mean, it's kind of this action adventure, Indiana Jones-esque, constantly moving, stuff to do type of adventure, right? And that's kind of what we're sort of thinking. And that's how we tend to play it from a player perspective. That doesn't mean that you can't find yourself in a murder mystery, which has a different rhythm to it. It has a different set of rules. It has a different set of things that you're trying to do. I think that what has to happen for that to be effective is that it has to be communicated metagame-wise to players. We're doing this now.
I think that's right.
Okay. That I will attempt to change my perspective on, how this is supposed to be played. And where I think this worked for me, I don't know that it worked in general, but it worked very well for me, was again a campaign that Steve-O ran, which was in the Take a Drink Traveler setting, surprisingly so, but he converted it into effectively a tactical board game on one of the campaigns. Part of what we were doing is we were going down to a planet and we had control over, there was a huge battle going on and we had control over some tanks, or I can't remember what it was exactly. We had control over a very small squadron. And the way that we played that game was different than how we normally play games, even though it had some of the flavor of the Indiana Jones, Star Wars type of, action. So I think you can do it, but you have to be very clear to the players of what you're starting next in the middle of this greater campaign. And I think that may have been the problem with that prison campaign, because it was a slow burn murder mystery pace type of setting where you have got to figure some things out before you can move on. There's more interesting things going on than just stabby, shoot.
Yeah, but again, not to beat that failed campaign to death, but again, it was completely unfair of how I even put you guys there. I mean, I gave you zero recourse. I had your ship seized and all this kind of stuff. And, I didn't allow you guys to do anything. Again, that was a mistake. But I think about when we're the one successful thing I wanted to mention on this topic was.
Yeah, let's. We've been beating how it doesn't work really well. Let's talk a little bit about and share our experiences with when it was done well.
So, a previous adventure, in fact, it's how I started the campaign originally with Jimmy and John, was a situation where, now this wasn't prison, but I think the topic is trapped, or, tough situation with limited choices. What I had them meet up as two guys mustering out of the military, which is how Traveler typically goes. And immediately it's a case of mistaken identity. And they have all these things, all this material that they'd mustered out of the military with, and they had bought with their credits, and like, hey, I'm going to buy these things. And then I effectively took all of that away, and they were on the run from the law, from elements of some type of organized crime, and it's literally everyone's out to get them. But I winged quite a bit of that, and had the basic idea of it, and they had literally nothing and had to scrounge and hide and do all this kind of stuff, and it was very exciting, and it was very fun for everyone, I think.
It's like North by Northwest without the charm of Clark Gable.
Gregory Peck. Oh, Cary Grant.
Cary
Okay,
Grant, yeah.
Well, even
Sorry,
Holy
Cary Grant.
crap.
Oh, shut up.
Yeah.
So
You
so
don't
that was
say
kind of
anything this whole time, Stephen, and then you come in with, this derisive, holy crap, about North by Northwest that we just bring up, and I haven't seen that in ages, and screw you, man.
That's okay. It's just, shake the dust off so our younger listeners can, understand what it's like to live in the cobwebs of your mind. That's fine. That's fine. What old, weird, dark-haired, skinny actor, who died, 30 years ago, which one was it who was in that iconic movie that no one under the age of 30's seen? Who is it?
Screw you, man. That's a good movie.
Anyway, I want to share one where I thought it was successful, and it's not the one that Jimmy mentioned, because I didn't realize that it was successful as it was. But years ago, it's probably been 15 or so years ago, we played a campaign, and John's mentioned it before on the podcast, where there was sort of a political intrigue. And the way that campaign went was a Dungeons and Dragons, and there was the players were a group that were escorting some people across a prairie, essentially, and there was an attack, and unbeknownst to the players, they were going to get captured. There was just no avoiding that. That was something that had to happen because they needed to be taken to a faraway castle in prison, and then they had to break out and then realize that things weren't quite as it appears. And for me, that entire campaign, except for a brief period, was very successful. I felt pretty proud of how that turned out because, and I can remember very clearly what was going on during the capture bit. Jimmy was the last person captured. And then when I knew that I was doing a good job was Jimmy was literally on the edge of his seat and his eyes were dotting back and forth. And he said, I'm not sure what to do to get out of this exactly. Not in a, I think I'm trapped, but in a, I think there's a way out. I'm not sure exactly what's the most effective way to get out, even though there was no way out. And to me, it felt like I did a good job of putting on somebody on rails without putting them on rails. So that was a very successful thing for me.
So Stephen, I'm going to move forward a bit in time here with movies. What was that James Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan that where it starts out with him in a Korean prison? Which one was that?
I don't know, but GoldenEye.
That was the last one.
Was it GoldenEye? It wasn't GoldenEye.
It was the last one he was in before they moved on to
The World Is Not Enough, or
yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, he starts off in a Korean prison and then he gets and actually has some of the most the intro title silhouette things that they do was really freakish.
Yeah, so that's what that adventure reminded me of. That thing where it's more like a cinematic, because we really didn't have a way out initially. You just wanted to say, it was almost like a theater of the mind kind of thing. Okay, we're going to set this up. You're in prison. 5 years have passed, and every day for 5 years or whatever it was, you're getting tortured by this dude. So you're setting it up like, man, this dude sucks. This torturing dude sucks really bad, and you hate him. You really, really hate him. And then you gave us the opening to get out, so you did that.
Oh, that's a different one, actually. Yeah, you're right. That was I'm talking about one that was way older than
I don't
this.
remember that one.
This is one where you were actually you got prison twice. I stole the plot line from a book by Raymond Fiesta, or however you say his name.
Fiesta.
Yeah, what I don't know how to say his name. But essentially you and John were rangers that went to the big city because somebody in your town got killed and you were going to be blamed for it. Yeah, you were you're both kind of archers or something like that. And
was John playing Cary Grant?
Probably. Yes. And anyway, so you went to a town and then you were captured for trumped up charges, and all of you are going to be
executed
if you didn't do this thing for the prince.
Yeah, I'm sort of remembering that.
And then you escorted this group, and then these orcs attacked, and it seemed like you could defeat the orcs, but in reality you weren't going to be able to defeat the orcs.
Was that the wagon train?
Yeah, the wagon train.
Oh, that was horrible. The wagon train part was horrible. It was like, all right, Adventures 27. You're still doing this wagon train thing. The orcs are still following you. It felt like it went on forever.
Yes, so from my perspective, it was very, it was successful. But it's interesting the way you're talking about it. Maybe it wasn't as successful as I thought.
Oh no, it was successful up to the wagon train part.
Okay,
that part slowed down. I felt like I was in Steve-O's Prison Planet adventure.
But
you never were there.
No, I wasn't there, but all the guys were saying, be thankful you're in D.C. I'm like, D.C.'s like the real life
it wasn't that bad.
That's what I was saying. I was like, D.C.'s worse than, being on a Inferno planet trapped and you can't do anything. I'd rather be there.
So another time that Jimmy was talking about, where I do think it was successful, I kind of forgot about it, was they were in the military to start off, and they were in this major battle, and it in itself was a bit of a prison, because obviously in the middle of a major battle, there's only so many ways you can move, so many things you can do. They ended up getting captured, and then they were in jail for 5 years or whatever, and that was a tricky thing because in some ways, I think it is like Steve was saying, is they were not established characters. They kind of started off that way because it was sort of a prelude of the battle, and they started off that way. But and that campaign I never got to finish either. I didn't kind of stop that one before it got played out all the way. But yeah, so I think that was a pretty successful one too. I guess I used that trope a bit more than I thought I did. and here's one from a player's perspective where I thought it was very well done. Is I really enjoyed this latest Traveler campaign that Jimmy put us on a planet where we had to survive the planet. and it was literally the environment of the planet. And it was effectively a prison campaign in a lot of ways, but it was very enjoyable to come up with creative solutions. And I never felt like I couldn't come up with an interesting solution to solving this problem.
Yeah, that was actually a lot of fun for me as a game master, too, just to see how you guys present you with a problem, give you a lot of different tools laying around to solve it, and then see which ones you guys picked. And sometimes it wasn't things I would have ever thought of.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun one.
Yeah, and it took the entire concept of murder hobo off the table, really.
True, because it wasn't like, there's a guy over there, shoot him. It was, there's a planet trying to kill you. Shoot it? No. Damn it, that doesn't work. All right,
yeah, there
wasn't
a lot of murder hobos in the last several games with Traveler either.
All right, I got to know something. Where did this term murder hobo come from? We've been throwing that around a lot.
It's been around for a long time. It's a slang that has been used in gaming for about 30 years or so, and it's just this notion that you see it a lot on the internet. A lot of people refer to murder hobos, and it's just this notion that in D&D, and we get sort of press that over to other genres, that effectively you just kind of wander around from town to town, and then you kill stuff, and then you wander around.
Your solution to every problem is murder.
According to the Wiktionary, in role-playing games, a derogatory slang term for a player character who wanders the game world unattached to any community, indiscriminately killing and looting.
So the that was a very successful thing for me because it did present a different style of gaming, and I enjoyed that piece of it more so than the AI on the satellite thing,
space station.
Thank you. Couldn't think of the word space station.
I wasn't even there, but I know it was a space station.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't think of the word space station. My brain just shut off for more than normal for a little bit there, but I felt that was less Rails-y than the AI piece, even though in a lot of ways they were both prison scenarios. And that was kind of, it was a very successful campaign in that sense for me as a player. But Steven, can you think of any other ones that were very successful for you as a player other than what you talked about?
Actually, what Jimmy was saying about the Abyss one, I had really completely forgotten about that, experience of getting out, and weren't there like bridges between pieces and water and rocks below?
The underground lake where you were the octopus most of the time.
Yes.
That was awesome.
There was so much about that game that was fun, and that particular game probably had the most enjoyable prison-like escape. I generally don't like anything prison-like where you're stripped as a plot device in order to try and shoehorn you somewhere in the game. A lot of people use it punitively. I've been around a lot of DMs that use it as a tool to punish the players because they don't like what they're doing. And that to me is a tremendous lack of imagination. And again, it runs counter to what the point of the game is. The point of the game is not to stoke, the DM's ego. The point of the game is to have this experience with people and provide an escape and adventure. And so I really do think out of, playing with a bunch of people in a bunch of different systems in a bunch of different places, that it's the inexperienced DMs who fall into this trap of using a prison-like scenario in their adventures to accomplish a goal that they want, that sometimes runs contrary to what's really healthy for the game. And as you progress as a dungeon master and you find ways around that, you can put people in a prison situation and, it's not punitive, and matches the story, and it allows you to enrich the experience. So, as of, I don't know, the past maybe 10, 15 years, I haven't run into any prison-like experiences in game that I really took a lot of exception with, because I've been playing with people who've been playing a long time now. So it's something that kind of, I think, goes away unless you're just playing with a DM who continues to be an asshole. And honestly, there are a couple of people here in town that I would not play with because they are, 50-ish year old white bitter guys who do it all just for, their own gratification.
The kind of thing you're talking about with this punitive GM, it makes me seriously think of it's like when you're in school and then somebody acts up and the teacher's like, well, because, Johnny did so-and-so, everyone's got to diagram sentences now. Oh, Jesus.
Well, now,
okay.
I would go ahead, Frank. I just wanted to kind of a little rebuttal about what Steven said. But I mean, as a game master, I've actually used desperate situations quite a bit, because I find players typically like a fast-paced game. So I've definitely thrown a lot of players in desperate situations, and because we all have fun that way. It's fun for me to come up with ways for them to get out, and them having crazy suggestions, because everybody's super desperate and wanting to move it forward, makes it very fast paced. So depends on the kind of game you're running. Yep.
So what do you think is, I think both those comments raise the question of what's so compelling from a storytelling perspective of the prison scenario. I think it's a arrow we reach for a lot in our storytelling quiver. Maybe almost, in my case, I guess it may be too much, but it's something that we do a lot. Is it because it just is a easy way to construct conflict, or what? What do we think is so compelling about that?
I think some of it gets to the fact where when you have the players in a desperate situation, you have this attitude of, I got to be free to do, to go kill other things, or, I got to be a murder hobo. I got to be me. You're not going to keep me chained up and stuff. But I think that, when you have these desperate situations, you actually see more ingenuity from characters a lot of times, or from players rather, to get their characters out, or maybe fully utilize their character, where they may not. Now, like when we play, a lot of times, Steven is always doing something like, well, we'll use grease to make fried chicken, or whatever it might be, or something. He does that all the time. That's kind
We'll feed the gods, but we'll poison the chicken.
Right. He'll do that sort of thing all the time himself. But a lot of characters, a lot of players, when they play, they only use maybe one small aspect of their character's abilities. I think of it kind of how D&D 4th edition was. I don't know if anybody remembers and stuff, but basically it was almost like they were.
We've collectively agreed that
should never have happened and stuff. But basically, you had kind of, it was actually almost like cards, but it was almost like playing like World of Warcraft. You had a couple of things you did. So like, as a ranger, I just had, I can't even remember the name of it, but it was like 2-shot was the name of it or whatever, and so you'd fire off 2 arrows. I was like, 2-shot. 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 That's all I felt like I was doing. I felt like I was just hitting a button. Like the, what is it for Staples, the big red button, that's easy, or whatever the heck it is. That's kind of the way it felt, because there was nothing, there wasn't really any other aspect to, how the characters were done. But, in most other games, you get it where you've got this situation where you're kind of stuck. You start to kind of explore, well, what else? My character's also got, my character can do so-and-so. I want to try this to get out of, the situation or something. So, I think you get to fully more, utilize your character in some of those situations.
Okay, yeah. So back to Frank's original question was, why do we come back to like prison as like a mechanism for storytelling? Or why is it popular? For me, it's two things. One is oppression is a great mechanism for a game where you're being oppressed, you're being constrained, and I sort of like that. Whether it's usually by force is a good way to do it. You just got to make sure that you give them an easy out. And the other and this is where I might disagree a tiny bit with Steven, it is using it as a form of constraining the characters from being like evil, rampaging monsters, murder hobos who go about slaying everybody in their path. So you've got this, prison's a really easy way to say, okay, you can do that, but there's consequences to your actions. You can't just go around and kill people and expect nothing to happen. And, prison's a good way to do that. And now I would speed the prison up. I would probably go the traveler route where you have tables and you get, and then you get in prison and then you roll on the table and it's like you roll a 20. You escape.
Hey,
nothing bad happens. You roll a 1.
That's in the new edition, by the way. There is prison.
Right. And then you roll
as a previous occupation,
right.
prison.
And then you roll a 1 on your muster out table. You roll a 1 and then, you lose both of your legs. And so you come out, legless. So you can have all of these negatives and positives that come out of your prison experience, and it doesn't have to slow down the game or gum it up.
For those who have listened to our podcast in the past, you'll realize, of course, that Jimmy was making up those numbers because with 2d6, you simply cannot roll a 20 or a 1.
Right.
Well, I was thinking originally, D&D. And then, of course, Steve-O has to bring Traveler into everything.
Drink.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is that if you do that with Traveler and stuff, then you'll actually come out with, you'll have a +2 strength, and then you'll come out with, 300 pounds of, license plates or something like that, I guess.
And a nemesis.
So,
and a limp.
Just back on the desperate situation scenario and talking about that. I know I've actually started more than one campaign that way, more than one game that way. And I think what the players like the most is, first of all, it's fast paced, but the second thing is the mystery. It's like, why are these people chasing me? What's at the bottom of this? So as they're going through their action of trying to escape or defend themselves, they're also trying to solve the mystery. And the combination of those two things usually makes for a good, fast-paced, exciting adventure, depending on how you set it up. I mean, a good example to me is the Bourne Identity movie or Total Recall. Both of those, with the original Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, all of a sudden all these people are after him and he doesn't know why. And he has to solve the mystery while also trying to escape. So, same with Bourne Identity. He can't really remember his past, but he knows how to fight, and he's got to get to the bottom of it, figure out who he is. And so I think when you create a fast-paced, desperate situation, which, again, this isn't quite the prison thing, but it's the idea of being trapped, and also trying to get to the bottom of a mystery at the same time. It just, those two dynamics create a very satisfying experience for both the players and the game master. Those are the most fun for me to run. So next adventure, you guys are on the run. You're going to break out of prison.
Awesome.
So let's get Steven's input there, because he's already sort of said that it's not something he typically enjoys. So what is it about that plot mechanism that you dislike, or maybe more accurately, what is more compelling about other plot mechanisms.
I think actually Steven said earlier that he didn't have a problem with it if it was done well and it wasn't being done punitively. I think his issue with the GMs who did it because they were kind of assholes. Yeah.
Wait, yeah, but I guess what I'm getting at the question is that what aspects of the plot mechanism work? So people that don't know Steven very well, he's got a very strong, in my mind, he has a very strong line between this I like, this I don't like. And sometimes it can be very pointed. This is a very specific point.
I was going to say annoying.
Well, there's a classic, for me, a good example of this is there's a classic car show that happens in the Pittsburgh area every year. And Steve and I went one year, and every car, I don't think he was a single car that he articulated to me that he liked. Every car was, I like this up until the fin angle is wrong or something like that. And it's a very specific thing that spoils the effect for him. So to that point, can you pin down a bit more other than a punitive bit? Is there a specific point where the prison story goes from, yeah, I'm into this, to, nope, I'm out?
Did that car show have any Geo Metros?
Oh, bring that up.
That was
man.
awesome.
Let me tell you.
That was one of the best parts.
That was a great role-playing companion, little convertible Metro 3-cylinder. It fit my character.
That was awesome. Yeah, that was great when he
Call
brought
of
that out.
Cthulhu adventure with our Geo Metro.
The very first night, it started building that character right away. It was great.
There you go. Thanks, Steve. Up yours, Jimmy.
Do you think it's... All right, to bring that in, is it because it limits the amount of character color that you can make to a character? Is that it?
Yeah, that's actually a good guess, because when, especially if you're playing with a bunch of people who have dedicated characters in what they can and can't do, and especially if you're playing a character who is a spellcaster, some kind of mystic or anything like that, most of the time when you're put in those situations, the people who have the overwhelming advantage are the ones who are based on strength. And the ability of the person who is trying to be more creative with their character is kind of worn away. Most of the time when I've been in prison situations that I did not like, there were no options for escape or progress within that point unless it was strength-based. So you're taking away what's unique about the character. You're not letting people play to their strengths or play to how they wanted to play the game, and you're rewarding one particular kind of playing. So it's overpowering the guards. That's what it all comes down to. It's overpowering the guards. It's somehow overpowering, a bar on a window so you can crawl out. Those kinds of things, it happens over and over and over and over. The other thing is I groan when I experience them initially, because I'm always thinking about the worst it can go and how boring it can be and how frustrating it is for me as a player. And that's why it's been so nice over the years, as we've got older and as, I've played with other people who are more experienced, that those prison situations aren't as one-dimensional as they used to be. And so I like that. I think every particular prison situation that we've been in the games that we all have played together, I haven't felt that same level of frustration. I mean, even as recently as, the homebrew one that you did, Frank, being able to get out of that and discover your character, because we all had a form of kind of amnesia and not knowing exactly what we were or what we were doing. And that whole situation was very fulfilling. In in John's, with everywhere we went was a different prison. Every place that we, teleported to through these, military bases, every one of them was its own prison, and it had its own challenges. And even with the nuclear reactor that was being talked about earlier, where I did not get the hints, I did not understand other things that I could have done so that we could have stayed there. That's wonderful. That's great. I missed it, and we had to go, and the place blew up, and it was awesome, and we lost it, and we didn't get to rescue all the pudding. But,
tapioca, baby.
Oh man, love that government pudding. So it comes like in a gallon can. It's fantastic.
In an apocalypse, that's awesome.
I know, right?
You can trade that for babies.
No, not at all.
You could.
Did you say babies?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I mean that's how that's how valuable 10-pound thing of sugar or pudding is.
Pudding.
Yeah,
pudding
people will give their
babies.
babies up for it. That's what I'm saying, Stephen. I'm not saying you take the trade. I'm just saying it's valuable enough you would get the offer for the trade.
That I would give up my baby for pudding. That's a terrible world, Jimmy. That is.
Well,
it's post-apocalyptic, man.
What's wrong with you? It's the road, man.
You can make babies all the time. You can make more and more babies, but how much tapioca pudding is left?
How much government pudding do you
They're
find
not
laying
making
around?
anymore.
You get a lot.
I can make another child.
Yeah, you can get a lot of protein out of a baby.
No, no. This is the road all over again. No. Bad John.
Look,
you're an editor's worst
cannibalism-
nightmare, John.
So cannibalism is something that isn't really looked at in games that much. And as someone who has played an unfortunate cannibal, I will say that
ribs.
Big
what?
Ribs.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember ribs.
Yeah. That,
Can I just say, I'm going to interrupt for just a second here. I just want to say I had a very interesting way to take this conversation, not the cannibal, not the baby thing, all that stuff like that. I had a point I wanted to make that I was very proud of. I was like, this will be a very interesting topic of discussion, sort of a left turn based upon what Steve was saying, but I've totally forgotten it. And all this sort of sidetrack. I mean, this is the first on this podcast where I'm just like, and then it goes out of my brain because I'm just mystified. So I'm going to go a different way and cut this off way after I should have cut this off. Okay, so a couple last points I want to make, or things I want to ask. The first is that what do you think it says about the moral fiber of your characters that they end up in prison a whole lot? Is it more of a comment?
The system's rigged, baby.
What is it? Is it a comment about the system? Do we manipulate the system so that you're unfairly restrained, or is it murder hobo has consequences? I mean, we end up in jail a lot. That's
really,
yeah. I think murder. Go ahead.
I don't think we have. I mean, a couple of them where we started there or something like that, but. Like, with Frank's, we started there.
We got there somehow.
Well, true. But the thing is, you don't know, I mean, it's based off of previous things that you didn't play as your character, so we don't know. We have no clue. I mean, the GM could say, well, because you're a murder hobo, that's what you do, so you just got put in prison. But, I mean, for one thing, we were in the Underdark. Remember? Drow, they're inherently chaotic evil. There you go. I mean, we're kind of stuck there, so... that we were, imprisoned by a drow, kind of, we were probably good, doing good stuff. And they're like, we can't have that going around. And so
and then in yours, Frank, we were political prisoners.
Yeah.
That other one. So.
Well, in most Traveler campaigns, I mean, nobody's above a little smuggling. I mean, every single campaign we've ever done, that you guys always do something illegal, always, and think about, in the future, think about how restrictive society is today. And I really think we overlook that quite often in Traveler. I know we're supposed to be on the frontier, but at the same time, we're pretty lax on some of the laws, because otherwise I can only imagine that the future will be much more restrictive, especially aboard a space station or a closed environment like that. It would probably be quite restrictive of what you can and can't do.
Necessarily
and
so.
the weapons you can carry and all that kind of stuff. So, it would be quite easy. I mean, based on the characters you guys have always played, I'm surprised you've never ended up in prison before or more often.
Probably so.
So you would say we really shouldn't reflect that in the way we play our characters at all. The fact that we're in prison. It's just a thing that happens, like going to an Old West saloon every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, think of Han Solo in Star Wars, which, he's a smuggler. Would you be surprised to find out that Han Solo at some point in his life was in prison? No, not at all. And I think we all kind of have that spirit when we play Traveler. We're all kind of that, freighter pilot that'll take a job under the table and, always a little desperate for cash and all that sort of thing.
I think it's also an unrealistic expectation for us as gamers to think that we can get out of prison.
Well, also, I
just
think part
to put
of
a little depressing cap on that.
Yeah. Well, I think also part of it might be this. We're hobos with a heart of gold. Yeah, I mean, seriously, I mean, for the most part, that's kind of like, we kind of play,
that's how you play.
Malcolm Reynolds kind of character. We go and steal something, but we find out, this is actually for these people that need this medicine. Well, we'll give it back, or something like that.
Right.
We're basically Robin Hoods. We steal from the rich and give to ourselves.
Some of it,
and we keep it.
So, okay. So
We
last thing I
support
want to
single
touch on.
moms.
Last thing I want to touch on is if you're interested in running a prison campaign, what kind of resources are out there that you could tap into for ideas or inspiration? We mentioned a few, obviously the Firefly campaign, some level that's can be kind of frontier prison-y, and we've mentioned Star Wars and all those sorts of things. Any other ideas out there?
Yeah, there is a really good one that I found when I was researching this, a really good resource. Found several, but there's a YouTube channel called Great GM. The guy's really good. I enjoy watching his videos, but he has one that's dedicated to prison breaks and gives really good ideas about how you should game master one. It's back from 2017. I think the title of it is How to Plan and Run an Escape in Your Role-Playing Game. So that was probably my favorite one of the ones I found. And then I found a couple others that were pretty interesting. One is from over at roleplayingtips.com, and they give 39 different examples of unique dungeons or unique prisons. So anything from like on a ship at sea, strapped in and rowing your way around, or on an island, a rocky island with just a few hundred yards of rocky beach before you hit the ocean, and then you got sharks and all kinds of other things. So,
what'd you call me?
Yeah, you heard me. And then the last one I found was over at RPG Stack Exchange. You can go over there and ask all kinds of questions. But I found a really interesting thing over there, and something we really didn't talk about, because I don't know that any of us are super interested in it, but maybe other people out there can read this and get some ideas, is that these guys were playing a game, and the players accidentally were tricked, and they accidentally ended up releasing this thing that killed a bunch of innocent people, like a ton of them. They felt horrible about it, and they got a prison sentence of like 14 years. So they were like, no, we're not going to try to break out of prison. That's fair, man. 14, that's more than fair. So we're going to stay in prison for 14 years and not try to break out. So now this game master's trapped. He's like, I've got to have these guys 14 years in prison. What do I do? And he's asking for suggestions.
I'd say time to roll up some new characters.
Fast forward 14 years.
That's it. Yeah. Or I would just do something different.
Yeah.
Well,
you could always have some crazy scenario happen. A war breaks out and they have to escape.
Right.
Force them to escape somehow.
But you can go over there and read that thread. It's my characters are in prison and don't plan to escape. That's the name of the thread, and we'll have it in the show notes in the description. Links to all of these places I've mentioned.
I think for me, if I were to have a tip, again, what I've kind of mentioned in the beginning, I think if I were to try this scenario again, I would make it the introductory adventure, especially if I didn't have a ton of experience running a game. Good way to introduce everyone. Everyone can have a little backstory, and get to know each other a little bit in prison, and then start, especially if you want to do a slow burn type story, start, weaving those clues and everything. But if you want to make it a fast-paced one, then make something crazy happen. Make a prison break, a prison riot, something like that, and they have to react to it if you want to have a more fast-paced adventure. But I think starting out with one would be actually, be pretty interesting. It's kind of got my gears turning, actually. So.
Okay, so if anybody else has any thoughts out there on prison break or prison scenarios and role playing, you can hit us up in the contact information. Come along in a second.
That's all we have for this week. Thanks for spending time with us. Please leave a review and comments wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have topic suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can reach us at roleplaygeeks@roleplaygeeks.com. Head on over to the website for an archive of all our previous shows, as well as links to all our social media channels. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next week.